Up in less than 2 weeks, it's a week from Wednesday. So, as we usually do, we learn the Mamorim that the Rebbe said in connection with that particular year's Hedek of Basi Legani. As we know, the Rebbe said in two cycles of 20 Mamorim every year, explaining another one of the 20 chapters of the Hemshech of Basi Legani. This year, it comes out, it's the 13th year in the cycle number 4, I think, since 1951. And we have two Mamorim of the Rebbe. The Rebbe said a Maimer in 1963, Tafshin Chav Gimel, another Maimer in Tafshin Mem Gimel, 1983, explaining chapter 13 of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Basi Legani. So we will start first with the Maimer of Tafshin Chav Gimel, beginning now. It's in this upcoming week's Dvar Malchus. Basi Legani Achaisi Kalam, I've come to my garden, my sister, my Kalam. So as usual, the Rebbe, until he gets up to Eis Yud Gimel, he, in short, gives a recap of everything that went on the Maimer for the previous 12 Eisias. And sometimes even here and there, we find some even interesting insights, new insights in the earlier chapters as well. Maybe Klekes might have come out more Bali Lul. And my father-in-law, the one whose yard site it is on Yud Shvat, brings down. What they said in the Medrash, Basi Legani. What does it mean when it says Basi Legani? I've come to my garden, Legnuni. Legnuni means to my place of delight, my special place, or my wedding place. It's a special place. I'm in private with those that I love. The place that the Eibster says, I was there, originally there, this was my initial place, this is the place where I started off. What does it mean that this was my main place? The Medrash says that the main location of the Shechina was down here below. So what happened after the Shechina being down here below in this world, in the idea through the sins, beginning from Adam edition that he did the sin with Eitz Hadas, and following that throughout 7 generations, that the Medrash over there enumerates the different negative things that they did, Cain and Hevel, and so on. Silkus Ashchina Mumato Lamaila, they caused the Shechina to depart from below to above, and it kept on going up higher and higher from one firmament, from one heaven to another heaven. Person went from the Aretz L'Rakia, from the Rakia Aleph to the Rakia Beis, and so on. And afterwards, Avram began to draw down the Shechina from above to below. Until Moshe was the 7th. And all the 7th are favorites. He drew down the Shechina from the first firmament down here to the earth. That's why it says the command they will make for me a mikdash, and I will rest amongst them. It's the idea of the home of the Shechina down here below. So just like it was the 7 generations that caused the Shechina to go up, so the 7 generations starting from Avram and concluding with Moshe brought down the Shechina all the way down here on the earth, and this expressed itself in the command that the Yidden were commanded at that time, and especially Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded to make a mikdash, so I shall dwell down here in this world. And how is this accomplished? And this occurs through the avoid of the Yidden Kadiuk, like the exact terminology, I will dwell amongst them. It could have said, like the Mefarshim say, it should have said, since the pasuk is referring to the words of Asli Migdash, they shall make for me a Migdash. It should have said, I will dwell in it, in the Migdash. Why does it say B'soicham? That means that through the Migdash, it's B'soich kol echad ve'echad within each and every one. So the Rebbe adds an interesting nuance over here. If we say that the Shechina is resting in everyone, that doesn't just mean that it's coming from somewhere else or someone else is doing it or just Moshe Rabbeinu. The Rebbe is connecting it If the Shekhinah is resting in every Yid, that means that every Yid is contributing to it. That this is through the avodah of every Yid. As he goes on to say in the last line of the page, they draw down the Shekhinah, should reside down here in this earth, that every Yid is the one that makes the Shechanti B'Soicham. Every Yid is the one that brings the Shekhinah down within each and every one. So he says, the Hine, Klolos HaAvodah, general service. But also the Migdash of making for me, a Migdash is going, concerning it's referring in the parsha, what we talk about in Parshas Truma, it's referring to the literal building of the Mishkan that was in the Midbar. Talzen them are concerning how the Mishkan was made. It says, Mishkan shall make the beams and the boards for the Mishkan standing shittim wood. So it shouldn't be like many times when log cabins were made, the pieces of wood were lying horizontally. So the pasuk tells you there has to be atzi shittim. So now the Rebbe is going to explain, taken from the Friedrich Rebbe's mind, why specifically shittim wood? What's the significance of shittim? Like it's explained at length in the Hemshech of Legani. The main avodah is to transform from the foolishness, which is hinted in the word shittim, to transform of the foolishness of the other side of Klippa, which is the shtus of the world. Instead, it should be transformed to foolishness and super rational avodah of holiness. And another expression of that in these very materials, that's also the idea of these boards or beams. Kedesh, the word Kedesh in Lashon Kodesh is Oisis Sheker. It's the same letters like the word false. Hainush Meshekera Oilam, from the falseness of the world, from the falsehood of the world. Yamidu Binyan, we will erect a building. Migdash Mishkan Barak. It will be a sanctuary. It will be a tabernacle, a place of rest for the Eibush. So that is what the Mishkan was about. So how does this reflect in the avodah of every single person? He says in line 9, and the idea behind this in the service of every single year. As we said, that when we say I would dwell amongst them, that means within each and every yid. And so if it's in each and every one, so that means that in each and every one, this is dependent. This is through our avodah of each and every one. So what does that mean? Is the idea of becoming close to godliness. That's the idea that the primary service that was done in the Mishkan was the service of bringing the karbanos. Though there are other services in the Mishkan as well, lighting the menorah, putting out the lechem upon him, and there's other holy items in the Mishkan, like for example the Aron. Still in all, the main avodah in the Mishkan was avodah karbanos. The Rebbe a lot of times brings down what it says that the Rambam says right away at the beginning of Hilchos Beis Bechira, the laws of the Beis Hamikdash. He says that the mitzvah of making a mikdash is to make a place that is ready to bring the karbanos. So we see the primary core aspect of the Mishkan is the karbanos. What does karbanos symbolize? It's the idea of bringing close all of my powers and to Hashem. That's why, like the Bechai explains, that karban, the word karban, which is the Lashon Kodesh word for a sacrifice, is from the word close, that one brings oneself close to the to Hashem, and it means actually the koiches. Just want to point out the Lashon of the Bechai over here, the very Geshmaka Lashon that he says. Let's see on the right side of the page, the bottom of the commentary, last line in the commentary, line 41. Now we'll go up to the top of the other column. He says, here is the language of the Bechai, that amongst the other things that he's saying, quote, every single attribute and character trait, top of the next pack of the column, would derived from the carbon. The intent and the purpose was to draw down and to place the spirit from above in one's attributes, and to offer and to bring close our attributes to the Eibishter. And this is the unity, and this is the union that takes place in the Karbonos. That's why it says in the Pasuk, you shall observe them and guard them to be makriv them to me. Like Amar lekarev ela lahakriv. What's the difference between lekarev or lahakriv? Lahakriv means something else. To bring close to the Eibishter the powers and the attributes. That's why it's called carbon. That's bringing close the powers and the emotions. So, without getting all into the details, but you see literally Chassidish terminology over here, how the Bechai says that the carbon is about bringing one's emotional attributes close to Hashem. And then the Rebbe goes on back to the text itself, line 13, after the parentheses, such a way that they go up to the most mysterious part of the Ein Sof, like there's an expression in the Zohar that the Raza, the Korban, that the secret and the mystery of the carbon rises up and becomes one with the mystery of the Ein Sof. So that's how bringing myself close to godliness, how much it like connects with Hashem. And then once we have this elevation, as we know, every elevation draws down a light in its result. By days and through the elevation, through bringing my koiches close to Hashem, afterwards it's drawn down from above to below. That's the idea that we say that a carbon is a reyach nichoyach l'Hashem. It's a pleasing scent for Hashem. So the Chazal explain what's it mean a pleasing scent. It's not shaykh the idea of by the Eibishter sense of smell and so on. But what does it mean that it's a pleasing spirit before me? The Eibishter says that I said and my will was done. So nachas reyach nichoyach is related to nachas ruach, that I said and my will was fulfilled. And we know that Chassidus explains this idea of nachas ruach. Nachas is from the word nechois, that it's from the idea of coming down lower. From the chois darga, it's coming down. So we have first the elevation of the karbonos, bringing our koiches and our kushim up to Hashem, and then we have the idea of from that results nachas ruach, the level of Hashem's spirit descending from above to below, which we said the whole time. That the avoid of the Yid, of every single Yid, in the spiritual Mishkan draws down the spirits from above down below as well. The Hamshacha that should be the Dira that Hashem should dwell within each and every one. The Rebbe continues in the second paragraph on page Zayin. It says, and the one whose yard site it is, now the Frierdiker Rebbe explains in the continuation of these Mamorim, says to be able to make that from the falsehood of the world and from the foolishness of the other side should be that I should dwell within them. For this there is the war that is done and fought through the Yidden that are called the army of Havaya. Like we have at the end of Parshas Boy, when the Maimer was said, was on Shabbos, given out Shabbos Parshas Boy. So the Yidden are called Sivas Havaya at the end of Parshas Boy. The Frierdiker and his Hemshech explains that in the word Sava, there's three explanations. Sava means an army, Sava means a beautiful combination of colors, and Sava means also a set time. And the Frierdiker Rebbe over there explains all of them are to be found in the service of a person to fulfill the shlichus of Hashem in the world that he's supposed to account. Then the Rebbe further continues in recapping what the Frierdiker Rebbe says. Afterwards, the Frierdiker Rebbe continues and explains and elaborates. During the war, top of page Ches, so as to be able to be victorious in the war, the king totally expends his treasures. Precious treasures, in general, not only doesn't he just give them away, he doesn't even show them. Not only does he give away and spend for the sake of the victory, precious treasures that were collected in this generation, even those treasures that his the kings, forefathers, kings before him, the royal dynasty, had gathered from previous and many generations, even those are given away for to be able to be victorious in the war. To such a degree that it's not just monetary treasures, but in the idea of bizbuz ha'otzros, expending the treasures, it's also included the fact that the king places his own life in danger to be able to be victorious in war. The Rebbe goes on to be able, for the sake of the giving away of the treasure from above. So there also has to be a vessel down here below that we also must do something in the form of an oitzer, of a treasure, something precious. That's the idea of the oitzer down here below, the treasure down here below, in the service of a person. That this treasure is like the Rebbe explains that Yir Shamayim is called a treasure in the Lashon of Chazal. So the Yir Shamayim of the Yid is a keli, a vessel for the treasure that the Eibishter expends in the war. The Frierdiker Rebbe explains, though the transferring of the treasures is through the officers, then that's done through the, like in the Nimshal, it means like tzaddikim and so on. The intention behind it are the actual troops, the foot soldiers. It's not so much the commanders and the officers that are accomplishing it. It's primarily the troops that are making the victory, and therefore the intention of the treasure is for the troops, even though the ones that are giving out the treasure is the officers and the leaders and the tzaddikim and so on. As I move on from this, is understood again, since the ones that are using the treasure and who are giving the treasure, it's the foot soldiers. The same thing in our avodah, and this understood. This treasure has to be in every single yid. They call Yisrael, all Yidden, even those are not officers, even those are not commanders in the spiritual army of Hashem, every single Jew, these are the troops of Hashem. Now we're going to get closer to the topic that he's going to talk about in Ois Yud Gimel, but not yet. Frierdiker Rebbe begins to explain what is this treasure of above that's being given for the Yidden to be able to be victorious in the war and so on. According to what the Zohar said, the Tikkun Zohar said, the infinite light of Hashem is high to no end, and it reaches down below to no end. Like the Frierdiker Rebbe explains at the conclusion of the Hemshech, the Inyan HaOitzer, what actually is the Oitzer, what's the treasure? He brings it in, but he doesn't conclude about it till later on. So he says, what is actually the treasure itself? That's what he says is that the infinite light of Hashem is high to no end. In other words, like a treasure that's hidden away and it's way beyond everyone and it's not something that's shared. The same thing, Ein Sof L'mayla Mayla Dinketz, the upliftedness, the exaltedness, the highest, most level of the Ein Sof. He explains later on, past Ois Yud Gimel, in Ois Yud Zayin, he explains that that's the level of the Ein Sof that's high to no end. So, to be able to explain that level, the Rebbe is going to say, the Frierdiker Rebbe wants to contrast it with the other half of the coin, with Lamata Mata Dein Tachlis. By contrasting it with the Lamata Mata Dein Tachlis, one will start appreciating what's this Lamayla Mayla Dein Ketz. Line 22, El Kitchukadei, Lahavinus Ilu Da'inus of Lamayla Dein Ketz, to be able to understand the advantage and quality of the infinite light of the Eibishter is high to no end. Magdim Levayr Ha'inin, the Lamata Dein Tachlis, he prefaces to explain the topic that it goes down below to no end as well. So that we need to explain how low the Ein Sof reaches to be able to preach, to be able to appreciate how high it is. The Lamata meaning the Ein Sof L'mayla Dein Ketz, the idea that the Ein Sof reaches down below to no end is lower than the level of the treasure that we're looking for, of the infinite light of Hashem, is higher to no end. May ha'ilui the Lamata Dein Tachlis, Yuvan ha'ilui the L'mayla Dein Ketz. From this advantage of understanding of how low it is, from that we'll understand how high. Top of page test. It says and he begins already in Ois Yud Beis. He starts already explaining the idea that it's below to no end. That over there, the Frierdiker Rebbe explains how we see how low the Ein Sof reaches in coming down and creating the worlds and all the details of the world. Every minor thing and so on. So we see the Ein Sof coming down in the creation of the world. As we'll soon get explained, nice base over there, it's in Sif Yud Gimel, he's going to start speaking about Lamata Dein Tachlis, not just concerning the creation. So the Rebbe concludes over here, this is all a this what was explained about the Lamata Dein Tachlis was explained in Ois Yud Beis, the paragraph of the Maimer that's connected with the yard site that was prior to this yard site. The yard site of Tafshin Chav Beis, in other words, the Yuchvat of Tafshin Chav Beis. Any questions before we go on to Ois Beis?
How can this world absorb all that infinity?
So now he's not getting into that. Let's just first see some more about the infinity that's here in this world. And then you'll have, the question will be even more difficult to comprehend. The creation, that's one thing, that's concealed. But we're going to talk about even more so in other aspects and components as well. Let's see if he actually addresses how it's possible for the world to be able to take that in. Okay, we're holding page test, page base, line 5. Ubesif Yud Gimel, and in chapter in Ois Yud Gimel of Basi Legani, which is also the gematria of the word Echad, Mamshech Labayat Inyan Noisav B'Lamata Dein Tachlis. He continues to explain an additional aspect of the idea that it reaches down below to no end. Loi B'Negel Inyan Esav was not concerning what he spoke about in Ois Yud Beis, concerning the coming into being of the world. That when the world comes into being, you need to have the Ein Sof to come down very, very low to be able to bring the lowest beings into being. But rather, in Ois Yud Gimel, he adds another aspect, another facet to this Lamata Mata Dein Tachlis concerning the expansion and the revelation of the Ein Sof. So again, as the Rebbe usually or often does in these Mamorim that explain the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer, he will quote a piece of that Maimer and then he will elaborate on it and analyze it and so on. So now he's going to quote a part of This is the quote from the Friedrich Rebbe. Masha the fact that the Tikkun Zohar says that it's below to no end. Koi ala gilui vaispashtus v'kinas ein sof vein shir ublig v'mamish ad lamata mat. It's referring to the revelation and the expansion in a way that's infinite and without measure and without boundary, mamish, to the lowest of the low. The madregas hayoser achroinis in the most last levels, hayoser achroinis and the lower level, lowest level. So that's what says the infinite light of Hashem is down below to no end. The expansion of the light is in a way that's without end, without boundary whatsoever. Ad madrega yoser mata mata until the level that's the lowest of the low. Ad kalashoyne. Up to here is the quote of the Friedrich Rebbe. So now the Rebbe is going to analyze these few lines that he brought from the Friedrich Rebbe. Hainu says the Rebbe. It's not that Friedrich Rebbe is trying to explain that the Tikkun Zohar is not just intending to say that there is much Seder Ishtalshus to no end. That's why it's called Ein Sof, because it's Ishtalshus just goes on and on. But rather, what the Chiddush of the Tikkun Zohar, according to the Friedrich Rebbe's explanation, is even the way it's found down here to no end. In other words, the Ein Sof is not like, if you will, watered down, but over there itself, it has a power of the Ein Sof. It manifests the power of the Ein Sof in the fact that there's procreation, that things procreate, and also in the fact that there's myriad amounts of creations and so on. So there's an expression of the Ein Sof down here in our world. Not just the Ein Sof is how far it reaches, but the Ein Sof is in the world itself. Line 19, the Friedrich Rebbe continues in the Maimer. It's praise that they say about the Ein Sof, that it could come down in an expansive way. It could expand, that it could become revealed. Not just that it expands, but it also becomes revealed down here below to no end. We don't mean just the expansion and the revelation in the infinite worlds that's higher than Atzilus, or even Hashem's expansion and revelation in the world of Atzilus. So first of all, we gotta say, if you're talking about Atzilus, what's the Chiddush? He says it's still a Chiddush. Even though in comparison to the infinite light of Hashem before the Tzimtzum, so even the infinite worlds that are higher than Atzilus, how much more so the world of Atzilus, they're called worlds. And since they're called worlds, therefore, they don't really have, they're called low in comparison to the Ein Sof. So therefore, one might say, oh, this is the Lamata Mata of the Ein Sof. It reaches past the Tzimtzum, it reaches into the Olam Ein Sof, it reaches even into Atzilus. So the Rebbe says that's not the Lamata Mata in Tachlis. That's not what it means that it reaches and expands down below. We call Matim still, and all the Rebbe explains, it's impossible to say Shashevach, that praise that the infinite light of Hashem is down below to no end. That's the praise, top of page Yud, that it comes down to the infinite worlds that are higher than Atzilus, and after the Tzimtzum in the world of Atzilus. How come? Why doesn't it make sense to say that's the Lamata? Even the worlds of Ein Sof, here he talks about the worlds of Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, the Olam Atzilus and the world of Atzilus, the Shameira Ein Sof Begili. Over there, the infinite light of Hashem shines in a revealed way, even in Atzilus. Havehem Kelim LaOir Ein Sof. These are vessels for the infinite light of Hashem. And since the vessels are also godliness, the Kalim of Atzilus, we know that the Kalim are also Elikus. Therefore, it's not a wonder. This is, by the way, still a quote from the Friedrich Rebbe, that this is not a wonder that the infinite light of Hashem shines in the Kalim of Atzilus revealed. Therefore, it's not a wonder also that they can receive the infinite light of Hashem that's revealed. It's not a wonder that Rebbe explains that the infinite light of Hashem could expand even into Atzilus. It's not also a wonder that the infinite light of Hashem can be over there in a state of revelation. As opposed to the worlds of Bri Yitzir. There it's a chiddush, and that's what the Tikkun Zohar is telling us, that even a Bri Yitzir Asiyah, it reaches over there as well. But before we explain how it reaches in Bri Yitzir Asiyah and all the details, next week we're going to learn more so about this idea of how the infinite light of the Eibishter comes down into the world of Atzilus and higher than Atzilus, etc.